If you have a group of shared DNA matches that all descend from a common ancestor, yet you just can't figure out how they fit into your family tree, then I think you're going to like this learning module. These clusters of unknown DNA matches are what we call unlinked family clusters. And my goal in this module is to share my tips and tricks for how to figure out how these matches connect into your family tree. I'm going to use Gephi software to create network graphs that allow you to visualize your DNA matches in ways you never thought possible. And in this video, I'm going to show you several things. First, we're going to define what unlinked family clusters are and how to find them within your list of matches. Then we're also going to talk about how to use Gephi network graphs to visualize all your DNA matches and how they're related to you, and also identify some of those unlinked family clusters within that graph. I'm also going to present to you some terminology. I'm a college professor, so I would be really remiss if I didn't, introduce you to some of the terminologies so that you can better not only understand what I'm going to present to you, but then use that terminology to help explain some of your findings to others. And then lastly, I'm going to demonstrate how to use Gephi network graphs to interpret and identify these unlinked family clusters. And if you already understand, points 1 through 3 right here, and you want to jump right to the Gephi network demonstration, just use the slide bar down there with the YouTube video that takes you right to the chapter where you're going to visualize and see how I'm using Gephi network graphs. But let's go ahead and get started and understand some of the items here. So what is an unlinked family cluster? Well, to really understand that, you have to know what genetic networks are. And genetic networks are a group of shared matches that all likely descend from a common ancestor. They're visualized on our DNA testing websites by using the shared match filter in some websites and the in common with filter on other websites. Now, one example that I use frequently in my blog is looking at my Hill lineage. And what I did was I descend through Susan Hill, and I picked another match to look at that descended from her half-sister, Matilda Hill. And when I did this shared matches function on Ancestry, I had a total of over 100 other DNA matches that were part of this genetic network of shared matches. Now you can see here, 30 of those matches were from other descendants of both Susan and Matilda's father, William Hill. But what I also noticed is beyond those 30, there were 70 other matches that I really couldn't figure out how they were related to me. Most of these I was able to subsequently identify as unlinked family clusters, which are a large group of matches who all descend from a single ancestor, but you can't identify how they fit into your tree. Here is an example of one of those unlinked family clusters that I found as part of this Hill genetic network. There was a total of 18 matches descending from a Joseph McKeel through 2 of his children that subsequently changed their name from McKeel to just Keel. And I was able to, group those 18 under Joseph. And I found several other unlinked family clusters within it that I'll introduce a little bit later. But that's an example of an unlinked family cluster because I don't know how Joseph McKeel fits in to my family tree. Now, one of the things that we're going to use to help identify these unlinked family clusters and figure out how we might be related to them is to use Gephi network visualization software. And I use Gephi software on my regular 9-to-5 job as a college professor. Here I teach marketing, and one of the research that I focused on there was to analyze advertising. and one specific category of advertising. And I looked at various data points to see how different authors, based off of the publications that they created, how they cite one another. And based off of how they cite one another, I could get a better understanding of the different types of advertising. In this case, it's out of home, which are essentially billboards and related. And so I was able to create this map. All of these data points are related, and they organize them and group them based off of similarity. Now, you don't want to understand really my 9-to-5 academic job. What you want to understand is, how do we use this same software for genealogy? And it functions exactly the same way. Whereas before I was looking at articles that were published in academia, here we're looking at our DNA matches. And what we are looking for is, again, not which authors cited one another, but which of our DNA matches match one another. And when they match one another, they're grouped closer together. But when we have a large number that match one another across many different matches, they're grouped more densely. And what this Gephi network software does is it groups them in what you can see here to the right, and it can color code it based off of ways that you set up your data in the software. And these clusters of DNA matches correlate to ancestral lines. But it's not that easy that it's going to automatically tell you which those ancestry lines are. But if we do it right, it becomes a lot easier to do that. So one of the things I'm not going to do in this video is tell you exactly how to download your DNA matches from the DNA testing websites and how to prepare the files to upload to Gephi. There is a researcher, her name is Nicole Dyer at FamilyLocket.com, who also does research like a pro with her mother. She put together a really good blog post that walks you through the steps. And I don't need to repeat that here, but if you read the description section of this video, you'll get a link to that blog post where it'll walk you through it. But where I'm going to take it from there is, how do you take what she does and how do you really customize it to help you understand who are these unlinked family clusters and how do they relate to you. One of the things I do differently than what Nicole Dyer does, typically at least what she has shown in a lot of her blog posts, are what you see there as number A, which is how they are visualized, all your DNA matches. I don't like that from an unlinked family cluster perspective because it's too close to one another, and you can't see how these links between clusters really are visualized. So I play with a setting in there that I will show you when we get to the video, or when we get to the software. But there is a layout setting for under Force Atlas 2 that you can play with the gravity, which is the degree to which clusters repel and attract one another. And in letter A, gravity is strong, meaning they're very compact. And that's great if you have a visual that you want to be compact. But I like to see the patterns. And so I have the different options there that you can adjust. I like option C, and it works in most cases, as long as, sometimes it creates something that is too widespread. But for mine, it worked really well. And I'll kind of explain that later when I get into the video. So again, I'm going to talk about some of the terminology associated with network graphs so you know how to interpret them. And when I speak about them, you know what they mean. If you understand this, again, fast forward to the right chapter that talks about when I'm actually in the Gephi software. So one of the terms that is used frequently is called a node, and that is nothing more than a DNA match. A node is one of those dots, and it represents somebody we match. Now, when we have multiple matches in a graph, they are connected with lines. These lines are called edges. And these edges are nothing more than to say one DNA matches another DNA match. And then when we have a group of DNA matches that all match one another or match some of them, but are closely connected because of the number of matches, we call that a cluster. And from there, we often have multiple clusters. And each one of these clusters likely represent an ancestral line, like maybe a great-grandparent or a great-grandmother. And these paths that connect these clusters suggest that they are somehow related on an ancestral line. Now, my example here is very simplified, and I only have one path. Ultimately, there's going to be many paths, but those paths will be very clear that they are connected. Now, when we're interpreting unlinked family clustered, there are two types of nodes that I really pay attention to. One is a bridge node. And a bridge node is when a good number of paths between two clusters come through one or several nodes or DNA matches. That suggests, and if you are lucky enough that you know who that node is or how you're related to that node or that DNA match, then that helps you even more strongly interpret how, in this case, how the green cluster and the purple cluster are related to one another. And that's going to become evident when we jump into the Gephi graph. Now, the next one is called a hub node, similar to a bridge node, but what is different is if you see the purple cluster, if it wants to somehow connect back to the red cluster, and again, this is probably suggesting lineage, the purple cluster mainly goes through the green cluster to get to the red cluster. However, there's this other node that is part of the purple cluster, maybe a little bit distanced, and we'll talk about why that's slightly distanced, but you see there's an alternative path that goes through that hub node back to that red cluster without going through the green cluster. And again, if we know the identity of that DNA match that is that hub node, that may help us interpret how these different clusters are related to one another. So, with that in mind, what I want to share with you now to set up the data that we're going to look at, we are using my first cousin once removed. He and I share my Wilson side. He shares it through his mother, and of course mine is through my father. And his is on his maternal side, and you can see his family tree here. And I've color-coded it to match what we're going to see in that Gephi graph. Now, here is a way to kind of look at the graph before we actually jump into it. But I want to show you some things here really quickly. You will see, based off of what I know about our family tree on that side, I have put all the DNA matches that are just on his maternal side here. I've taken out, manually removed all of the clusters associated with his paternal line. And I've been able to identify most of these clusters, and you can see how they correlate over there. And again, the ones that are his Irish cluster, the Gallaghers, the Cullen, the Duffys, the Minnigans, and the Kellys, you see how they're further removed. They immigrated to the U.S. in the mid to late 1800s, whereas all the other clusters on the other side, the Pettits, the Freed, the Hill, Boyd, Wilson, Winland, and Pence, they're all here in the 16 and 1700s, predominantly in Pennsylvania. Now, you'll see several clusters that I've highlighted with stars. These are ones that I don't know how they're related to me. I'm going to show you how I think that they're related to me. And I know enough that I actually do know what some of these unlinked family clusters are within them. Now, I'm going to explore in this video 4 of these clusters because they're all related on my hill line. That's the ones that are in the lower left-hand corner or near the center. The one in the top center, I'm not going to talk about. I have an idea of what that cluster represents, and I certainly know how they're related to me. I just haven't found the documents or something else to more definitively connect it. So in what I'm going to show you with inside Gephi, I'm going to show you several of the tools I use to really identify these unlinked family clusters, figure out how they are possibly related to me. And I'm going to use all of these different items here to kind of walk us through. So let's go ahead and jump into the Gephi network software. Okay, let's get started on the demonstration of using Gephi to analyze unlinked family clusters. The assumption is that you've already created your Gephi file by uploading your DNA matches. And if you haven't done this, in the show notes for this video, there's the blog post by Nicole Dyer, who does a really good job of setting that up. The first thing that I want to talk about here is how we want to display our matches and the clusters associated with them. Typically, this is the way I like it, when there's a lot of space in between the clusters and I'm better able to see how they're interconnected with one another. But a lot of times what other people recommend is that you do something that looks a little bit like this. And it's very compact. In many ways it looks great because it would look good in an image added to a report or something. But I don't like that, at least for analyzing unlinked family clusters, because it's really hard to see how they are connected to one another. So the best way to change this is to go in the layout section here under Force Atlas 2, and you come down to the tuning section. And just a simple click of stronger gravity gets it centered like this as a circle, but if you remove it, it allows you to spread it out a little bit more, and I'll go ahead and do that. And you can see here that I'm going to click stop. This is typically how I like to use this particular, for my cousin's DNA matches, the best way I can visualize what's going on here. Now, beyond this unchecking and checking the stronger gravity, you can also play around with this gravity setting. Using it at a 1.0 works great. If you make it smaller, then those even going to be greater distance, a little bit larger. It brings it a little bit more compact. But I feel like just checking and unchecking the stronger gravity will really work in most situations. So that's the first part of this. The second thing I want to show you here is how we use the labels. Now, in here, if we zoom into some of it, you'll see that I have some labels, not all of them. I purposely hid it for the demonstration. But down below here, in the lower right-hand corner, just click on this and then click on, make sure you're under Labels, click Configure. And these are all the items you can display. Now, I always put modularity class because if you remember when you set up your file, the way these clusters are formed is using the modularity function. And that allows these data points or DNA matches to cluster around other ones that they share matches with. And so I am going to, just show you here. I'm using this filter right here, which is called profile URL. It's not a URL. It was an empty field that I'm putting my notes on here for this purpose. But just so you have it set up there, I think that will work great. If we go to the data laboratory, this is like an Excel file of all of your matches. And what I want to show you here really quickly is you see this profile URL. That was an empty field for me, and I put in here my notes for purpose of this demonstration. And so that's going to help me show you what I want to show you in this video. But this note column here is when you write notes in Ancestry or MyHeritage, and then you download your matches, that note field comes with you, and that is really important. And before you ever engage in setting up a Gephi file, make sure you're utilizing your notes field in your DNA testing website, because that's going to help you tremendously. And I'll turn that on a little bit later, but for all purposes now, I just have it linked to the profile URL, which is my working file here. Now, also I wanted to point out to you, there's a column here that says name. That name field is what your DNA match has typed into the database as to who they are. Sometimes that's a proper name, sometimes it's an acronym or a pseudonym. Your admin is if your kit is managed by somebody. Both of these fields, when you find a match in the visual side of Gephi, you can come back to here and look at it and then jump into Ancestry or MyHeritage, wherever your matches come from, and look at it and to see if you can figure out how you're connected by looking at their family tree. And this column for people has how many people are in their family tree. And when I come back and look at these matches and I see one that says 0, I don't really spend too much time going back and trying to find them in Ancestry or MyHeritage. I concentrate on the ones that have people in their family tree, because that's going to help me figure out potentially how we're connected. So I'm going to go back in here, and what I want to now show you is what is called a bridge node. And if you remember, a bridge node basically connects two clusters, and most of the paths between those clusters go through these nodes. And I'm going to concentrate on this lavender or bluish purple cluster here, which is one of my unlinked family clusters. And if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see that most of the paths going from this red cluster here, which is my cousins Hill, Boyd, and Wilson line, which is closer to present day, and that's why it's pretty much centered around here. But you can look at this, and most of the paths that are coming through here that I've highlighted here come through our ancestor named William Hill, who married Elizabeth Winland, and they're all through their daughter Susan. Now, Susan is our direct descendant, so I'm not surprised that most of these are her. But if you look at it a little bit deeper here, here is one for William Hill and Elizabeth Winland's son, William. And you can see that a lot of them go through him as well. And what this initially tells me is that this cluster here is likely related on either the Hill or the Winland line. Now, if I look a little bit further and do some additional analysis here, let's see if I can find it here. Here it is. Here is a match here that is for William Hill and Elizabeth Winland through their daughter Mary. And you see here that she has some connections not only to the blue and to the red, which is also the more recent generations of Hills, my matches and my cousin's matches, but also to this orange cluster. And this orange cluster, if you remember from the preceding slides, this is my Winland cluster. And so this is beginning to tell me that, I need to do more research, of course, but this blue cluster might likely be on my Winland line rather than my Hill line. And some of these yellow connections too here are suggesting that. And what I've been able to find out about the unlinked clusters here, they all seem to center around an ancestral couple from Pennsylvania with the last name of Knutzer and Upp, spelled UPP or sometimes OPP. And what I've noticed here is that this cluster, which is Winland, is also, so Elizabeth Winland's parents are Heinrich Winland and Dorothea Pence. And Dorothea Pence's parents are thought to be somebody with the last name of Upp or OPP or UPP. And that may be that connection. Obviously, looking at it from this perspective, this gives you further research that you can do from both a DNA analysis perspective as well as from documentary. So let me recenter it here. And now I want to show you hub nodes. Now hub nodes work, and I'm going to show you these two hub nodes right here. They work as, they seem to be connecting either this blue cluster to either this green cluster here, this seafoam cluster, or from blue to this army green cluster here. And rather than go all the way from blue to red and then back down, they seem to be bridging the gap, but more act like a hub, like these paths all converge on this hub, if you will, this central point. So let's take a look at who these are. Well, if I drill in closer, this one is Hill and Winland through their daughter Mary. And this one here is also through their daughter Mary. So this could be suggesting, these clusters could be Winland or it could be Hill. We don't know. It seems like this bluish purple cluster is likely related to the Winland side, which makes sense why, Mary, daughter of William and Elizabeth Winland, or William Hill and Elizabeth Winland, connects there. But I have other evidence that suggests that these clusters are probably actually on my hillside. And let's take a deeper look at these. And I want to show you here, I have some bridge nodes here that connect basically the red to the green, and that's through Mary. And this one's through Susan. So again, we're getting that level of confirmation. But when I dig a little bit deeper down here, I have a couple of matches here. These two are really interesting because I think this sheds the greater light. William Hill had a second wife named Elizabeth Whitman. And these two matches here are through their daughter Matilda. So this is Susan's, my ancestor's half-sister. And these two matches really isolate these clusters to say that this is more on the hillside than the Winland. And so that's kind of giving me some, greater information to analyze these particular clusters. And you may be asking yourselves, and I didn't necessarily explain it, why some of these are larger circles and some of them are smaller. They basically refer to the amount of shared DNA. And of course, we would share more DNA with Susan and Mary because we both share Hill and Winland. And the Matilda ancestors, which are down here, are smaller circles because we only share Hill and not Whitman. So you can kind of begin to see that as well. So once we have that basic kind of understanding of bridge nodes and hub nodes, that really allows us to see who the unlinked family clusters are, how they might be related to our particular known ancestral lines. But let me show you one other factor here that's going to help us a little bit more. And I'm going to go back in here and reconfigure my node labels or my DNA match labels. And instead of the labels I've used for demonstration purposes for this video, I'm going to switch to the note field. And again, these notes come from where I've taking notes in where my DNA matches on the testing website. And so those come through. They're going to be quite text heavy, but it will give me some information. So if I come back into here and I hover over some of these, I can begin to see that some of these are to the unlinked family clusters that I have otherwise previously identified. Those are those Keel and McKeel here. Clark was another one of mine. And let's see if I can see a couple other ones. Here's another Clark. Keel, another Clark. So you can begin to see how this really is beginning to help you understand. Now I also have this one here for Lynn. And Lynn is also an unlinked family cluster that is prevalent not only in this green cluster, but across all of these clusters, and it's even more so in this army green cluster. If we come into here, we'll see there's Lin. Let's see, where's another one? That one's, I think, connected to my Lin cluster because they live in the same area. I mean, they were literally neighbors. I haven't just figured out how they're connected yet in Tennessee. Here's another Lin, a Lin. So you're beginning to see how it's easy to kind of analyze. And so that's why I wanted to show you a little bit about the labels. Now, the very last thing that I want to show you here is using filters. And the filter I like to use, it's over here on the right-hand side. It's under the attributes. And I'm going to click on partition, which allows me to break apart the clusters based off of an attribute. And the attribute I'm going to look at is modularity class. And again, modularity class correlates to each of these clusters. So I'm going to double click on that. It shows up down here, and you can see that the cluster's here. Now I know the numbers of what I want to show you, and let's just see what this does for us. So if I select the 0, and then I'm going to, because 0 is red. I know these colors aren't coordinating, but I do know that's the number, and then number 4 and number 5. And then if I hit the filter, everything goes away except these clusters. And now I can get rid of some of the noise, if you will, of some of those miscellaneous paths as they cross one another, and makes it hard to see the relationships. Now you'll also see that some of these matches or nodes are further away. And really what that is telling me is that some of these matches are likely connected on into the red cluster, but they probably share another ancestor with another one of my DNA matches that I don't share, but they share with one another. And so it pulls it away from the center of the cluster. But this, you can see how this tool is really helpful for seeing how, if I was to look at something, where it connects into the other clusters. Let me recenter it here. And I'm going to stop that, pull everything in here. Now I'm going to select, for example, my other ones that it was 6, 12, and let's see, number 3. Here it is. If I click filter, and let me get rid of number 5. I forgot that I had selected those. I'll keep 0 here, get rid of 5 and 4. And, now I'm able to see also more clearly how these 3 clusters, they seem to emanate from this cluster, which again, it has a lot of my hill matches that are closer to the present day cousins. And, I'm able to look at and figure out, like, for example, this particular bridge node goes through Susan, which is not unexpected. And again, you can kind of see here, this one is Mary and Susan. We looked at that. And again, this is another tool to help you better visualize your clusters here and analyze them to hopefully figure out how your unlinked clusters are related to your particular ancestral lines. Well, I hope you enjoyed me showing you how I use Gephi network graphs to interpret these unlinked family clusters and move my genealogical research forward. If you like the content that I created here and you want to get notified every time I create similar content like this, and you need to stay up to date on genealogical information, then I encourage you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get those notifications on a regular basis.